Secretary of the party and Program Director of this program. You will understand that these messages are very many, and we will not read the details of the messages themselves, but just to observe that indeed we have received messages of solidarity both locally and abroad. We have received messages of support as have been presented here by the African National Congress and our ally and COSATU, also our ally. We also have received messages of support from international fora such as the Sao Paulo Forum, which represent countries' progressive forces in Latin America. We have also received messages of support from the International Meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties, which brings together progressive communist and workers' parties across the world. We have received messages of support from the embassies also located in South Africa and elsewhere. And I just want to single out one or two, three messages of support which are very important, at least for us. We've received messages of support from the Communist Party of Cuba, from the Communist Party of Canada, from the Communist Party of Venezuela, and Partido Socialidad of Venezuela. We have received messages of support from the PSOB of Brazil, KKE in Greece, from the Communist Party of Britain, SACP in Portugal, from the Communist Party of China, from the Communist Party of Vietnam. And this Comrade National Treasurer Program Director represents just a sample of our international ties and connections across the world. And all of these messages will be posted on our website, the content of which will be shared with all of our members. And with that, I want to hand over to you so that we allow the General Secretary to present the main message for the 99th anniversary of the party. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Brief enough. Thanks, Comrade NDGS, Comrade Mashaku. Comrades, we are now getting to the main message. Our General Secretary, Comrade Blade Nzimande, is ready to actually deliver this message. This is the message of the 14th Congress on the occasion of celebrating the 99th anniversary of the SACP, and also it's the official launch of our centenary program. Comrade Blade, I will actually hand over to you. You know, normally we would have made our songs. We miss those slogans. We miss our songs. We miss to revive ourselves. But based on the platform, I'm getting straight to you and kindly take over the platform and deliver our message. Comrade Blade.
Yes, Chair, I'm here. Thank you very much. Comrade Chair, let me start by greeting you, Comrade Joyce Moloi Moropa, Program Director and our National Treasurer. Our first Deputy General Secretary, Comrade Sodima Paila. Our second Deputy General Secretary, Comrade Chris Mataku. Let me also greet Comrade Zweli Mkhize, here representing the African National Congress as a member of its National Executive Committee. Let me also greet Comrade Mike Shingange, who is the first Deputy President of COSATU, and to thank these latter two comrades for their very wonderful and revolutionary messages on this very important occasion for us. Let me also greet Comrade Tinyi Kontini, the National Secretary of our Young Communist League, and also our host province, the Moses Mabhida province, as led by Comrade Themba Mthembu, the Provincial Secretary, And also, since I am in the Herigwala district, Pietermaritzburg otherwise, I also would like to greet Comrade Luhle Ndlovu, who is our local district secretary here. And let me greet all the comrades who have joined us and who are watching us throughout the length and breadth of our country. This week marked on the 30th of July, 2020,
Yes, we can hear you, JS.
Is my video on now?
Yes.
My apologies there. I hope I don't block it again. Comrade Chair, I was saying that this week...
You just blocked it again, GS.
Yeah, my apologies. I know where the problem is.
We can see you well now. That's great.
The problem is that I'm trying to read my speech from my screen, which means I can't do that.
Yeah.
But this week, we marked the 99th anniversary, last week, on the 30th of July, of the founding of our Communist Party. We celebrate this historic occasion, the founding of the oldest Communist Party in Africa, under the theme, Learning from the Past, Active in the Present, Building the Future, Building Socialism Now. We are also celebrating our 99th anniversary in the year that we are also celebrating the centenary of a number of our departed veterans and stalwarts. This includes 2020 being the centenary of Comrade Herigwala, Comrade Brian Bunting, Comrade Fred Cannasin, Comrade Raymond Mhlaba, Comrade Vuyisile Mini, Comrade Rika Hodgson, Comrade Fleck Boshielo, Comrade MP Naika, Comrade Rusty Beinstein, and Comrade Hime Barrel. We say, long live their memory as we celebrate our 99 years. 99 years ago, on the 29th of July 1921, communist militants announced the formation of the Communist Party at a public meeting that was held in Cape Town. The founding Congress of the Communist Party opened officially on the following day, which was the 30th of July 1921, at number 20 Plain Street in Cape Town. It was on that day that the resolution formally establishing the Communist Party was passed. The Congress was held over 3 days until the 1st of August, 1921. However, the formative process of the Communist Party dated back to 1914 and the outbreak of the inter-imperialist First World War. Opposition to the inter-imperialist First World War, what Lenin, by the way, at the time described as a war of thieves for control over the world, came from revolutionary wings of existing mass socialist parties in many parts of the world. Here in South Africa, Revolutionary Progressive in the South African Labour Party then broke away from that party in opposition to its reformist sellout position of joining the war in defense of the British Empire. In the name of working class internationalism against imperialism, Comrades like David Ivan Jones, Bill Andrews, and S.P. Bunting established the International Socialist League, the nucleus of what would soon become the Communist Party in South Africa. In 1918, T.W. Tibedi, a member of the International Socialist League, organized the very first African trade union, the Industrial Workers of Africa. The history of the Communist Party since that time in building the progressive trade union movement in our country is indeed unparalleled. During that year, 1918, the formation of the Industrial Workers of Africa led to the Johannesburg bucket workers' strike. 152 workers were arrested and sentenced to 2 months imprisonment under the so-called Masters and Servants Act. S.P. Bunting, 5 other members of the International Socialist League, as well as several members of the African National Congress, then known as the South African Native National Congress, were also arrested. The International Socialist League was the largest component when different Marxist formations and comrades came together to form the Communist Party as a unitary Marxist-Leninist formation in 1921. This step forward was indeed inspired by the 1917 Great October Socialist Revolution and by the Communist International, formed in 1919 following the revolution in Russia. The formation of the Communist International was an active expression of Communist Party organization in every country. The Communist International admitted, in terms of its policies at the time, only one affiliate per country that met its basic conditions of admission. This principle of unity was one ground upon which our party was established in 1921, championing before all others the principles of anti-imperialism, working class internationalism, and non-racialism. Now, as much as ever before, Comrade Chair and comrades, it is critical to recall the anti-imperialist foundations of our party. For much of the 1990s and early 2000s, as the SACP insistently noted at the time, the very notion of imperialism seemed to disappear from the strategic perspectives of our ally, the ANC, at that time, we noted. Perhaps confused by the global celebrity of Comrade Nelson Mandela and the apparent embrace of our democratic transition by all and sundry, there was an unfortunate tendency to imagine that a new peaceful and more equal global order had emerged. But the collapse of the Soviet bloc of countries did not mean the disappearance of imperialism. Imperialism instead became more arrogant and more triumphalist. This aggressive arrogance is still in evidence today in the midst of the current coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. As imperialist-backed pharmaceutical companies are competing for mega profits by cornering the market on a vaccine and treatment. With the deepening global capitalist economic crisis, imperialism has become more aggressive, more dangerous. In the midst of what some are already calling the Great Recession, following the Great Recession of 2008, and as the US global hegemony begins to slide, US President Trump is determined to make America great again, in quotes. He is saber-rattling in the South China Sea. He is threatening to unleash war on Iran. He is deploying masked federal stormtroopers onto the streets of US cities against peaceful Black Lives Matter protests. And he was withdrawn from the World Health Organization. President Trump forgets that if you impose sanctions on Venezuela, if you tighten the embargo against Cuba, if you want to attack Iran, if you pull out of the World Health Organization, as Comrade Zweli can be our witness here, any one person who is infected by COVID-19 in any part of the world, that poses a threat to all the peoples of the world. Therefore, we need to remind President Trump that you can't deprive Cuba of the necessary medicines and hope that you will keep coronavirus outside of the United States. Now, it's against this background, then, in which our own Treasury and Reserve Bank have made what we believe as the SACP is a grievous mistake of taking on a dollar-denominated IMF loan, exposing our economy to further suffocation by imperialist interests. In the midst of important discussions within the ANC-led alliance, which as the SACP will remain firmly committed to, on an economic response to our many challenges, it is hard not to see that this behavior is an attempt to achieve through IMF conditionalities what cannot be achieved through a democratic discussion here at home. We have said as the SACP, and would like to repeat, it is very important that priority is given to the mobilization of trillions of rands of our own domestic resources before we consider foreign assistance or foreign loans. In confronting this situation, we need to draw courage and learn lessons from our past determination and resilience in our struggle for liberation and social emancipation. Indeed, we come a long way. The Communist Party of South Africa, which was renamed the SACP in 1953, when we reconstituted it underground, following the apartheid regime suppression of Communism Act of 1950, is here and alive and stronger. Throughout our 99 years, our party cadres have made a major contribution to the struggle for national liberation, national sovereignty, and democracy. As communists, we don't boast, but we state facts. We've just been reminded on the passing away of the last Rivonia trialist, Ubaba Mlangeni, recently, that all the Rivonia trialists were members of the South African Communist Party when they were tried in the Rivonia trial. That just is one example of the significant contribution of the SACP to the national liberation struggle in our country. To name other few areas also where we are proud of today celebrating 99 years, this would include the following. The Communist Party consistently, over the 99 years, exposed the connection between class exploitation of workers by capitalists, racist oppression, and patriarchy. The Communist Party was also the first political formation in South Africa to organize based on the principle of and to advance non-racialism. The Communist Party built progressive trade unions and a national liberation movement when in fact also we were forming part of it, which we still are, by the way. But we built the progressive trade union movement to bring an end to all facets of oppression and exploitation of one person or social group by another. It was the Communist Party that was the first political organization to be banned by the apartheid regime in South Africa in 1950. It was also the Communist Party, before all else in South Africa, that first advanced the struggle for one person, one vote. It was Communist Party activists like Dora Tamana who ran cooperatives in informal settlements in the 1940s and the 1950s, and Ruth First, who advanced progressive journalism and freedom of the press. As the SACP, we are proud that today in South Africa we have freedom of the press, not least because of the contribution of communists to this principle. That is why we don't accept opportunistic criticisms of the party when we engage the media critically. We engage the media critically sometimes because of our own experience, because we also are the champions for the freedom of the media that we today have in South Africa. Ruth First, for instance, was martyred. She was killed by the apartheid regime through a parcel bomb in Mozambique. She numbers amongst many, many martyrs of our struggle for liberation and social emancipation, including Johannes Nkosi, Vuyisile Mini, Alpheus Madiba, Basil February, Ahmed Timol, Matthew Koniwe, Chris Hani, and many others who were murdered by the colonial and apartheid regimes. The Communist Party continues to be a target of the exploiters and the corrupt. In recent years, decades after the end of white minority rule, there have still been assassinations and attempted hits on SACP activists. Most recently, the SACP lost members who were killed for being vocal against the looters of the VBS Mutual Bank in Limpopo province. Their only sin was to be in the forefront of our campaign against those involved in that VBS Great Bank heist. The SACP has also lost anti-corruption fighters killed in Mpumalanga, KZN and other provinces. The SACP and our loyal activists on the ground, including our principled cadres in the African National Congress and in COSATU and in the broader democratic movement, together we won't be deterred by this violence. The looters of public resources must be rooted out and sent to jail to wear orange overalls. Today, as we celebrate the 99th anniversary of the SACP, we dip our red flag in honor of all those who have fallen. Let us pick up their fallen spears and intensify the struggle against corruption. A luta continua. The SACP is no longer an underground organization and cannot be stuck in the past methods of organization. The SACP, like communists always do, must move with the times and be innovative. We want to say to the comrades who normally take a jab at us and say, we are no longer the party of Moses Kotane. Of course, if Moses Kotane were to wake up today and find the Communist Party that's exactly the same that he left when he passed away in 1978, he would disassociate himself from that Communist Party because he would say, why have you been so asleep and not changing and adjusting and leading current conditions? You are still in 1960s when I was General Secretary of the SACP. In other words, those who then say, we are no longer the party of Moses Kotane. Yes, we plead guilty. If you want the party of Moses Kotane, go to the museum. But we are the SACP of 2020, but that is still inspired by the vision and the exemplary leadership of leaders like Moses Kotane. Today, the SACP is larger than ever before. It has surpassed a membership of 311,000. It is continuing to grow. However, as we state in our program, the South African Road to Socialism, what we seek to build is a large but vanguard party capable of setting an example of discipline, commitment, and strategic capacity on all fronts of struggle. There is a big difference between such a sizable vanguard party and a mass party. We are not a mass party. We are a large party with a vanguard character. The SACP has grown because it has been active and attractive to an increasing number of activists who have grown because we've been prepared to speak up in defense of workers and the poor of our country. When our government unfortunately introduced a misguided gear macroeconomic policy in 1996, the SACP said, we need a state-led industrial policy. We said macroeconomic policy must be subordinated to and support national production development. We did this on a principled basis, being part of the alliance and not opportunistically walking away of the alliance, and sought to engage from within as well as from without by mobilizing the people on the ground. When our government at that time launched a misconceived privatization drive in the late 1990s, the SACP said, down with privatization, and we mobilized against it.
Etzebeth was cleared of wrongdoing relating to claims about a racially charged incident in Langeban. The 28-year-old had been accused of involvement in an incident of assault and racial abuse.
We said we need a strong democratic developmental state instead.
And according to a report in newspaper,
it was the SACP
a while ago, but the governing
that started the vitally important land and agrarian transformation campaign post-1994 in the 2000s, challenging, among others, the so-called willing seller, willing buyer, and pushing for land redistribution. Again, it was the SACP that started the campaign for the transformation of the financial sector, resulting in important advance for the working class and the poor. It was the SACP that first exposed the existence of corporate state capture in our country. Back then, implicated elements, their factional networks and hangers-on, reacted by dismissing the existence of state capture. And some of them even embarked on something illegal and unethical by secretly and illegally tapping the phones of some of the leaders of the South African Communist Party. The SACP persisted. Again, it became the first to call for a judicial commission of inquiry into state capture. This call was rejected by the same networks and in addition by almost all the parliamentary parties who have big mouths today when they opposed this idea at the beginning. The former public protector reached the same conclusion as the SACP, prescribing the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into state capture following an incomplete investigation. And as part of the remedial action, the Chief Justice was to identify a judge to head this commission. It was at this stage that the SACP saw and also welcomed the change of attitude from many quarters that opposed its call for the establishment of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into state capture. We also welcome the latest step taken by President Cyril Ramaphosa to actually ensure that the information, there is sharing of information that is emerging from the Zondo Commission with the law enforcement agencies. We do honestly and frankly appreciate that, because that's a very important step forward in the fight against corruption. 99 years of the SACP, but the struggle is not over. Many of the post-apartheid achievements experienced by millions of the working class and poor are under threat. We need to learn from the past, intensify our activism in the present, and build the future, build socialism in the here and now. A lot of advances have been made by our country and by our democratic government since 1994. As the SACP have been party to that, electricity, provision of free education, including bursaries, scholarships for higher education students who come from poor backgrounds, and many other achievements. As the SACP, we need to advance must include the following. We must strive to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic and ensuring that we do not return to the chronic crisis before the crisis, but we advance through a developmental path. This requires building a democratic developmental state with an internal capacity to serve the people. As the SACP, we also want to put it on record. We welcome the very decisive interventions made by government, led by the President, Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa, in the fight against COVID-19. And we also want to say to our people, however, government alone will not be able to defeat this pandemic. Our people need to cooperate with government and amongst themselves to ensure that we defend ourselves against the pandemic. Those who are not certain whether this pandemic kills, they now realize, because this pandemic is no longer just coronavirus, but today it has a name and a surname, because many people we know now and some of our families have unfortunately passed away. And of course, the SACP takes this opportunity to express our most sincere condolences to all those who have passed away and wishing those who are ill to recover soon. The other thing that is a priority to us, we must intensify the struggle to end the tenderization of the state and the corruption that it breeds, and tackle its associated tendencies like tenderpreneurs and their COVID-19 manifestation, what some are referring to as COVIDpreneurs. We want to say that tenderization of the state and the corruption that it breeds constitutes one of the single biggest threats to our national liberation movement, the very same movement that brought about democracy in our country. We must say it's very sad today, because in our movement in the 70s and the 80s, we were very proud that our revolution will not degenerate like some of the heroic revolutions that we were seeing degenerating. Nevertheless, we cannot proudly say so today, given the threat that is posed by corruption, tenderpreneurship within our own ranks, that unless we defeat corruption, we will actually bid our revolution goodbye. Therefore, during this 99th anniversary, we are calling upon the alliance to unite and rid itself of corrupt elements. We are also calling upon the law enforcement agencies to act without fear or favor. Rising inequality, unemployment, poverty, and unequal development are indicators of the conditions of the masses, where a few have been empowered through state power, including state policy and tenders. The SACP is warning against this self-destructive trajectory of empowering a few whilst the majority continue to be impoverished. And we want to say again, our movement cannot be held hostage by the interests of the few, by greedy interests and their associated factionalism. A failure to reset the revolutionary historical mission will see a continuing decline until all our power is gone. The movement has to act in the interest of the masses, not in the private wealth accumulation interests of the few. We are also saying, as the SACP, during these 99 years, we must advance rapidly to building a national health insurance that serves all our people on an equal footing. Comrade Zweli Mkhize, you are sent today by the ANC to give the message. You are also Minister of Health. As the SACP, we support you fully in the struggle to build an NHI. But we are aware that if we leave the struggle to government alone or to you alone, we won't be able to win the struggle. That is why the SACP commits to mobilize and be in the trenches together with millions of the workers and the poor of the country to say, we want the NHI not tomorrow, but now. We must push for building the publicly owned economic sector in the interest of the people. This requires that we build state-owned enterprises and companies that must be supported and be turned around to strive. In order for this to happen, the SACP will intensify its campaign against privatization in all its disguises, including neoliberal structural reforms. Such reforms directly, mostly, contradict the aim of building a capable democratic developmental state and are hell-bent against the interests of the working class. Our other priority is that we need to advance structural transformation to build, diversify, and raise the levels of national production in our country. This requires a decisive drive to industrialize South Africa, to transform the mining sector, to support high value-added manufacturing and beneficiation, for localization of production so that we create jobs, for the transformation of the financial sector, to name but a few programs that are needed to radically reduce inequality, unemployment, poverty, and unequal development. On the financial sector in particular, a campaign we have been waging for 20 years now as the SACP, we want to say it is very unhealthy that a developing country like ours only has 4 big monopoly banks, most of the time are not interested or are incapable of providing microfinance to support cooperatives and small and medium enterprises. No wonder that the guarantee that has been given by government of 200 billion rands to support SMEs has hardly been spent because it's been given to these big monopoly banks who do not know how to support SMEs and cooperatives. We are calling for a diverse financial sector that must also include cooperative banks as well as state banks where they are required. We want to say that in order to solve the economic crisis that we face, especially the crisis of the debt to GDP ratio, we must not follow the route that National Treasury seem to be embarking on, of increasing accumulation of foreign currency-denominated debt as a solution. We are going to engage as the SACP robustly on this, both inside our alliance as well as outside the alliance. To defend our country's democratic national sovereignty, our fundamental right to self-determination, our hard-won democracy, the SACP rejects domestication of foreign economic agenda, including the neoliberal structural reforms as pushed by the IMF and the World Bank. Let us also combat with equal determination, if not more determination, the scourge of gender-based violence. As the SACP, on our 99th anniversary, we want to commit ourselves and call upon all progressive South Africans, not only women, but men as well, to join in the struggle against gender-based violence. In our own African languages, siyezigcizelele ukuthi lamadoda ahlukumeza abantu besifazane ishimane ovuka uvale abantu abangazi ukuthi omunye umuntu uphathwa kanjani. Sizoyilwisa lento ngayo yonke indlela esinayo siyamagomanisi asemzansi kulelizwe ukuthi masihlukaneni nokuhlukumeza abantu besifazane emadoda, abantu besifazane, abantu bokuthandwa, abantu bokunakekelwa, abantu abakwaziyo ukwenza izinto isikhathi esiningi, akubona abantu bokuhlukunyezwa nokuthi babulawa. We must also intensify the struggles against criminality, drug and substance abuse, because these things are destroying our society. But we cannot end, as we move towards ending our message, without mentioning this. We mention it at the end, not because it's the least important, but it's one of the most important messages we are sending to the workers of our country today. As the SACP, we are seriously concerned about the rising tide of the jobs lost, of the jobs bloodbath. Retrenchment notices in the private sector have been increasing at an alarming rate. The private sector overwhelmingly controls our economy. In the retail sector, workers at Edgar's, at Dion Wyatt, for example, are facing neoliberal restructuring, branch closures, and job cuts. In the metal sector, retrenchment notices have been rising. This is the case in many other sectors of our economy, wholly controlled by the private sector. It is very clear also that there are mismanagement and bad governance in the private sector itself, as highlighted by the rising insolvencies and liquidations. The recent statistics released by Stats SA on insolvencies and liquidations are shocking. It is also very clear that key sections of the private sector are forcing the working class to be the ones that absorb the negative economic and social impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We strongly denounce this jobs loss bloodbath. We also wish to caution state entities not to follow the same route, as we are also equally concerned about planned retrenchments in many state-owned enterprises, including the SABC and the SAA. On the South African Airways, we are pleased to say that the rescue process seems to have finally been placed on a stronger footing. However, there are still challenges. There are problems in terms of governance and top management. A new board that meets competency requirements must be appointed as a matter of urgency. And the top senior management structures at the SAA must be inclusive. We want a management structure in all our state-owned entities that is inclusive in terms of gender and also inclusive in terms of race. The times of whites-only senior management must be over in our country. There is no other way for the working class to unite from all walks of life if we are to move forward. The SACP is today calling upon organized workers to work together to advance the common interest of all workers against economic exploitation, irrespective of their federations that they are affiliated to. Coming out of our 4th Special National Congress, we said we commit to deepening our alliance with COSATU, but we went further and said we call upon the whole progressive trade union movement, both in COSATU and outside, to unite and convene a joint national summit to discuss a common response to economic exploitation and the high levels of inequality, unemployment, and poverty. If COVID-19 as a dark cloud provides a silver lining that after this pandemic, we can build an inclusive economy, the time is now for workers to unite that the economy we built after COVID-19 is indeed inclusive. Singabasebenzi noma ngabe sikweziphi inyunyana sithi asihlanganeni ngoba impi esibhekene nayo yinye eyokulahlekelwa umsebenzi nendlala. Singavumeli ukuthi sisezinhlanganweni ezahlukene lento bese sihlukanisa phakathi ngoba iyokwenza ukuthi lo mnotho esifuna ukwakha eNingizimu Afrika emva kwalomkhuhlane naleli gciwane elikhona fanele kube umnotho omusha la kuzozuza khona wonke umuntu, hayi la kuzozuza khona kuphela ogimbela kwesabo. Umyalezo wethu omkhulu lo namhlanje esiwusho kubasebenzi nanokuthi amakomanisi sizosebenza neCOSATU ekwenzeni isiqiniseko ukuthi abasebenzi abangekho enyunyaneni bayangena enyunyaneni. Let me conclude this message by expressing the SACP's unwavering solidarity with the people of Swaziland who are struggling for democracy. Our solidarity with the people of Western Sahara who are struggling for an end to occupation by Morocco. The people of Palestine who are struggling for an end to oppression and theft and occupation of their land by the apartheid regime of Israel. We call upon all democratic-oriented South Africans to condemn the Israeli regime for its oppression and suppression of the Palestinian people. On this day, we also wish to express our unwavering solidarity with the people of Cuba in defense of their right to the fundamental right to self-determination and against U.S. imperialist aggression. We're also expressing our solidarity with the people of Venezuela against imperialist machinations by the United States and its puppets. And we want to say there is only one elected president in Venezuela, that's President Maduro, not any other puppet that is actually set up and supported by Western imperialism. We also want to express our solidarity with the people of Bolivia and President Evo Morales, who was kicked out through a coup, and our solidarity also with President Daniel Ortega and the people of Nicaragua. And indeed, on this day, solidarity with all the oppressed and the exploited people across the world. And with those words, we say, socialism is the future, build it now. Amandla.
Away, two. Thank you very much, GS, with that powerful message and also launching our centenary while we're celebrating this historic day, a revolutionary anniversary, 99th anniversary for the South African Communist Party. It actually gives us various tasks.
Right, there you go. You heard from the General Secretary, Dr. Blade Nzimande, there on the occasion of the party celebrating its 99th anniversary. It's a virtual rally this year, and Dr. Blade Nzimande talking initially about, I guess, the theme of this year's celebrations. He was speaking about the formation, the history of the formation of the Communist Party. Also speaking about US President Donald Trump's handling of the coronavirus issues around the world and its impact in terms of global impact. And also thereafter talking about, well, firmly committing to the ANC alliance on corruption. He was talking about the looters of public funds must be rooted out. He says the struggle against corruption must be intensified. He was also talking about their role as the SACP in terms of calling for a judicial commission of inquiry into state capture, and welcomes the steps taken by President Cyril Ramaphosa with regards to sharing of information with law enforcement agencies. Speaking about COVID-19, and there again using the term, as we've heard in the past, we need to do away with COVID-preneurs, as he puts it. Also talking about the alliance which needs to unite against corruption, rid itself of corruption, and warned against empowering the few while the majority suffers. And he was also talking about the need to rapidly build a national health insurance, not tomorrow, he says, but today. I guess further illustrating the need and the urgency of getting an NHI in South Africa. With regards to the financial sector, was saying that it's very unhealthy for a developing country like South Africa to only have 4 big banks, and they're again calling for a diverse sector. Going on to say, in order to solve the economic crisis, especially a crisis of debt to GDP, saying that we must not follow the route that the National Treasury seems to be embarking on, of increasing accumulation of foreign currency denominated debt as a solution. So they said they will further engage not only National Treasury but within the alliance as well. So summing up the message given there by the General Secretary, Dr. Blade Nzimande. Quick break.